Few things improve troop morale better than a hot meal, even if the name of that hot meal kinda sucks. Like this favorite frontline breakfast from World War II, creamed dried beef on toast, better known as shit on a shingle. So thank you to my Patreon patrons for constantly supporting this channel, especially on videos like this that'll probably get demonetized because I keep saying shit on a shingle. This time on Tasting History. So I am releasing this video on Veterans Day, or Armistice Day, or Remembrance Day, depending on where you are. And every Veterans Day, I remember my grandpa, Gramps, who used to tell me stories about when he was in World War II. He was part of the medical corps, and he would tell me these stories about when he was over in England and France and even in Germany just after the end of the war. And I credit those stories with giving me my love for history, because here I am, a 7-year-old playing with his micro machines, and this old guy is telling me about stuff that happened to a 7-year-old so long ago. But the way that he told the stories was so engaging and made it so personal that I was entranced, and I just loved him. I couldn't get enough. And so I guess you can kind of say that the reason that Tasting History is a thing is because of those stories that my veteran Gramps used to tell me. And so I figure what better way to honor my grandpa here on this Veterans Day than to make a dish that he might have eaten when he was in the military, even if he very purposefully left it out of the stories he was telling his 7-year-old grandson. Because there was no way my grandpa would ever say the phrase "shit on a shingle." Or as the recipe from the US War Department in 1944 called it, creamed dried beef, which for 6 gallons called for 7 pounds of dried beef, a pound of fat melted, flour, evaporated milk, water, and pepper. Separate beef into small pieces, mix melted fat and flour, stir until smooth. Mix milk and water, heat. Add gradually to flour mixture, stirring constantly. Add chipped beef and pepper. Heat to boiling point, reduce heat, and simmer about 10 minutes. Note, serve hot over toast. Now obviously, since this makes 6 gallons or 100 servings, I'm going to make a reduced quantity today, but I do think it's really interesting how they give the quantities in the original recipe. Besides pounds and gallons, they also measure in number 56 dippers. Like 1 pound of fat would be a half number 56 dipper, because you wouldn't often have a scale on hand when you were out in the field, but you would probably have the standard quart-sized number 56 dipper. And the writing on the dipper was so standard that you could use it to make measurements as well. Another book specifies 1 cup of liquid comes to the top of the date figure, 2 cups to the top of the manufacturer's letter, and 3 cups of liquid will come to the top of the US letters. I of course have no dipper, and I'm not making 6 gallons worth, so for a smaller portion, what you'll need is just over half a pound or 250 grams of chipped beef. So this is chipped beef or dried beef, and they come now in these little jars. You'll need 4 for this recipe. And it's basically ground, very salted beef that is then pressed into a form, dried, and then sliced very thinly. And when you open it, kind of reminds me of the smell of a can of dog food when you open it, but that smell goes away, kind of. But it's all wrapped up like this, and they kind of remind me of Pringles. Yeah, so this is what you need for this recipe. Then 2 tablespoons or 30 grams of fat. This recipe is not specific in what kind of fat, but in the cook's manual from 1910, which may be the earliest recipe for this dish, it says butter is preferred, so that's what I'm using. A heaping 1/3 cup or 40 grams of flour, 1½ cups or 350 milliliters of evaporated milk, 1½ cups or 350 milliliters of water, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, and a few slices of bread for toast. So the recipe from 1910, which was probably used during World War I, also includes parsley and uses beef stock. It also uses 15 pounds of chipped beef for 60 servings rather than 7 for 100 servings like the World War II version. So it was 4 ounces per serving, and then by World War II it was just over 1 ounce per serving. Just thought that was interesting. But to make the World War II version of SOS, chop the chipped beef into small pieces and then peel everything apart and put it into a bowl and soak it with some water. Some old recipes say that the beef is so salty that it needs to be scalded in boiling water. I don't think the modern version is as salty, so if you soak it for 15 or 20 minutes, that's going to be just fine. While it does, mix the evaporated milk and water together and heat it over low heat. Then separately melt the butter over low heat in a pot and add the flour and whisk together. Let it cook for about a minute, then slowly pour in the hot milk mixture. You want to constantly be stirring and let it cook for 3 or 4 minutes while it thickens. Then whisk in the pepper, then finally add the chipped beef. Then bring the pot to a boil and then turn the heat down so it just simmers for about 10 minutes, and it'll thicken up even more during that time. Now, one of the things that actually inspired me to do a video for Veterans Day was a conversation that I was having with an old friend that I used to know in New York who now runs a website called veteranlife.com. The site is dedicated to providing veterans and military families with different resources and benefits that they might not otherwise know of. And it actually also has a lot of wonderful things for civilians, because I am about as civilian as you can get, and yet I spent time on this site because they have a whole area of military history. I read a wonderful story about the Navy's ice cream barges from World War II. They were basically giant floating refrigerators in the Pacific that provided ice cream to the sailors. And I think that that is going to have to be the topic for a video in the future. But for now, let's talk about the men who would have been making that ice cream, or more specifically, on a shingle. So whenever discussing a topic as large as American military cooking during World War II, there are so many variables and situations that there are going to be exceptions to everything and exceptions to the exceptions. There was fighting going on all over the world, and there were different levels of preparedness at any given time, so even the military's best laid plans often went awry. But in general, this is what things should have been like if you were cooking in a field kitchen. Typically, each company of about 150 to 200 men would have their own field kitchen with maybe a half a dozen cooks. With some help, they could set up the entire kitchen in under 30 minutes. The goal was to have the kitchen close to the men that they were feeding, but depending on a lot of things, terrain, the proximity to the enemy, sometimes they could be 100 yards back or 10 miles back. The nice thing about being further back is then they could often team up with 3 or 4 other kitchens to become a battalion-sized kitchen. Also, being further back meant that they would be less likely to be the target of enemy fire, so that they could maybe do some cooking during the day, because if they were too close, then all the cooking had to be done before sunup and after sundown. Now, the kitchen could be anywhere from a nearby building to a tent to the back of a truck, but they all had the same equipment. Most important was the gasoline-powered M1937 range stove. It was very versatile and could perform all of the functions of any stovetop and oven in a normal kitchen. They were, of course, rather compact, but usually a company had 2 or 3 that they could work with. And one training video from World War II said,
"If you lose your oven, take a couple of barrels, cover them with clay, and bake your bread."
Now, some of the other equipment included large immersion heaters that could heat up a barrel or even a huge tub of water rather quickly, that could be used then for cleaning dishes or for making food and for taking a hot bath, preferably using new water. And speaking of water, when it came to drinking water, it needed to be purified and then was kept in a Lister bag. This was meant to distribute purified water for up to 100 men. Then there were Mermite cans. These were insulated containers, usually 7 gallons, and meant to hold 3 or 4 inserts. Like a giant thermos, they kept things hot or cold and were often used when the kitchen was far from the front line. Food could be prepared at the kitchen and then put into the containers, into the Mermite can, put on a truck, and brought to the front line to serve the men. But if you were doing this, you really wanted to pay attention to which Mermite can you took, because some were labeled with ETO blood bank, with blood meant for transfusions given near the front lines. Mixing those up would be a mistake you would not make twice. But assuming that you got the right can, what kind of meals are you loading them with? Well, officially, you have very little say in it. Especially starting around World War II, there was a big push to make sure that the troops were getting enough of the right minerals and vitamins, and so dishes and entire menus were created by nutritionists back in Washington. And in one video from 1943 about the nutrition program, they talk about how they started out by examining the diets of the enemy armies. The Japanese were supposed to have extreme energy given to them by a simple handful of rice, and
The Nazis are supposed to have a Superman vitamin pill.
though the attempt at replicating the effects of this pill with mere vitamins did not really work, because actually this superhuman pill was something called Pervitin, which had methamphetamine that would give gave the Germans a lot of energy, if short-lived. Some say that the Blitzkrieg couldn't have happened without Pervitin because some soldiers had to stay up for days at a time. But while vitamin B might have not replicated the effects of Pervitin, the military did put together a top-notch diet plan for the cooks out in the field to follow. Menus for dinner could include chicken a la king with lyonnaise carrots and an apricot upside-down cake for dessert. And all of the ingredients would be dried or salted or otherwise preserved and shipped all the way from the US to the front lines all over the world. But of course, most of these ingredients never actually made it to where they were going, or at least not in a timely fashion, so you didn't have everything at once, so the field cooks usually had to cobble something together with what they had available. Though depending on their location, that could be something pretty nice depending on where you were. When the 10th Mountain Division was in Italy in 1945, Corporal John Stone said, "We used lots of fresh Italian ingredients, as much as we could no matter what we were cooking. We also learned to cook a lot of pizza. This woman and her daughter, they taught us how to do it right." You made do with what you had, and many times that actually meant field rations. Basically, if you were near the front, at least one meal a day was going to be pre-packaged field rations. And for some troops, it could be every meal, every day, for days or even weeks on end. Now, I want to do a whole video on the field rations of World War II and how they evolved into the modern MRE, or meal ready to eat. And actually, I should try to do that with Steve MRE, who actually eats these old foods. I'll put a link to where you can watch him eat actual rations from World War II. But since it was part of a cook's job to make sure that everyone had the field rations that they would need, we should touch on it now. So there were lots of types of field rations that you could get depending on where you were and at what point during the war you were at. But between 1942 and 1945, the two most common were the C ration and the K ration. The C ration was 3 meals, each made up of an M unit or meat unit and a B unit, which was the bread or dessert. The M unit was the main dish. You could have beef stew with peas or a canned meat and vegetable stew. At the beginning of the war, there was pretty much only different stews, but later on, you might have meat and spaghetti and tomato sauce, eggs and potatoes, or pork and beans. Then the B unit had some hardtack, though it was supposedly softer and easier on the teeth than that of previous wars, the biscuits being made of soybeans, wheat, egg, and lard.
Pretty tasty biscuit.
Then there'd be some coffee powder or sometimes lemon drink. Then there'd be some sugar, salt, maybe chocolate, and often cigarettes and gum. All told, the 3 meals provided 3,700 to 3,800 calories per day and could be eaten cold, but were better when they were cooked. Now, the C ration was a good amount of food and was quite varied, but it was heavy. And so if you were remote or a paratrooper, you would get the K ration. They weighed less, partly because they had less calories. They had 2,830 calories per day, and were supposed to be much less edible. Things like the fatty pork loaf and the maltose and dextrose tablets would often just get thrown out by the troops. The thing is, the K ration was meant to be used for no more than 5 days, but there are stories of soldiers living almost exclusively off of them for weeks at a time. One unit, known as Merrill's Marauders, lived almost exclusively on K rations for 5 months in Burma. And after 5 months of fatty pork loaf every day, imagine how happy they would have been to walk into a field kitchen and be offered something like a plate of hot on a shingle. So once everything is simmered for about 10 minutes, toast your bread and then ladle the creamed beef onto the toast and serve. And here we are, World War II creamed dried beef. I'm gonna kind of spread it around here on the shingle because I feel like they gotta go together. All right, here we go. Oh, not bad. All right. It needs the shingle. The toast is really necessary for the texture, because once the toast kind of had softened, the texture of the actual beef, it's not terribly pleasant. It's just kind of chewy. That said, the flavor of the whole thing, not that bad. In fact, it actually reminds me of the gravy that my grandpa used to make, though he would put it over biscuits, and it was made with bacon fat. So if you want to make this with bacon fat, it is quite good. That said, the flavor is good. It could use more spice, probably, some more pepper. I mean, it's a pretty small amount of pepper for that quantity that they used. So you could add more pepper. You're not being rationed, hopefully. What I would think is actually really good is just a different meat, like ground up sausage or cut up bacon or something like that. Something that just the texture is a little more pleasing to the palate. That said, when you compare it to a lot of military foods, it's not that bad, especially the older military foods out in the field. This one, I could see looking forward to it. Anyway, if you are a veteran or in the military or a part of a military family or just interested in military history and lifestyle, make sure to visit veteranlife.com. And for those of you lucky enough to have a grandparent still around, even if they weren't in World War II, go ask them to tell you a story, because I'm sure that they would love to, and you'll appreciate it when you're older. So don't forget to like, subscribe, have a fantastic Veterans Day or Armistice Day or Remembrance Day, and I will see you next time on Tasting History.